Hey guys, how are you doing? I'm back and I have Adams with me who's back again. I wanted to do some discussion about some parallels in the scriptures that I was looking at. So I was listening to a podcast. A lot of you might have heard of it. It's called Ancient Traditions. It's a good podcast. Um, it, I guess what I'm saying is it talks about symbolism a lot, but symbolism is one of those things where you can look at things and you can also say, I'm not exactly sure what it means or if there's a specific thing to it, and or someone else can be very positive that this is what they mean, and that doesn't mean that I trust them all the time. So I'm just putting that forewarning out as we talk about it. Once again, I think there's a lot of and in symbolism. I think that there are things that it doesn't mean, because I've heard people say certain things and I'm like, no, that's not what this symbol means. But I guess what I'm saying is when you're listening to the Ancient Traditions podcast, if you do decide to listen to it because I suggested it here, just be aware that that doesn't mean I endorse everything on that podcast, because I think there's always room for interpretation. So that's my point. What I wanted to talk about was I wanted to talk about Genesis 1:2 today. So Genesis 1:2 is clearly right at the beginning of the Bible, and there's the creation going on, and this is before the creation even. This is like letting the creation. This is talking about how the creation occurred. And so I'll just read the first verse and the second verse of Genesis. Everyone knows the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Second verse. And the earth was out without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So I'm going to go over a few things, and Adams, feel free to jump in whenever you want. But the main thing that I'm going to be focusing on is two things: the symbolism of waters or deep, and the Spirit of God. Those two things. So when they talk about when there's water in the scriptures, especially if it's any large quantity of water, there's something that it means. And I've been coming to a comprehensive understanding of what it means. I don't know the best way to describe it, but if you see symbolism as a language, then what we're doing sometimes is we're translating something from a different language into English, and so we put all these different English words to describe what it is. I don't know if you have good examples of that in like Portuguese, Adams, where like there's a word in Portuguese that sometimes when you translate it to English means one word, and sometimes it means a different word. Does that ring any bells?
Sort of. Their Portuguese might not be the
Well,
greatest
let,
of
let me use an example in
examples, but
Spanish.
there are.
There's por and para, and they mean for and to, but also that and because and why, and just like a million words. And so if you're just looking at those words, do you have any examples like that in Portuguese that we can run with?
I mean, we have those same examples. There's
Yeah,
like slang terms which mean a bunch of things.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, there's several.
What
My
what?
favorite is
Mm-hmm.
bache, which it's just like an expression of exasperation. It can mean good, bad, in between, about a variety of things.
So if I knew that better, I would use that. So let's try using that in this example. But what happens is, like, say someone uses that word in Portuguese, and then in English you try to translate it. In one instance, you might mean like, "Oh, he's saying that was good," and then in another instance, you'll be like, "Oh, he was saying that was bad." And someone listening into it will be like, "But I thought that symbol meant good, or I thought that word meant good." And you have to understand much more of what that word means to be able to say, well, this is why it means this in that certain situation.
Yeah, so not only do you have like you can translate it to like okay, that's what they're actually trying to say,
Yes.
or there's even words kind that aren't the same, but like we kind of use them in similar ways. So like I could say like wow. Wow is a pretty good translation of bache.
Uh huh.
Uh because you can use it in a variety of situations and good, bad, in between. they don't mean exactly the same thing, but there's a similar sentiment in a variety of situations. But if you're reading it, you might not understand what sentiment the writer or whatever is trying to get at.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's also an example of like what say when someone's texting something versus when someone's saying something. It's the same problem. Is that those words actually could mean multiple different things. You need the context, the how it's being said, and a bunch of other things. It's even more so with symbolism. So, for example, when we're talking about water with symbolism, especially if it's a large chunk of water, we're usually talking about chaos. But it also means uh, formless, large quantity of stuff. Like it's a huge thing. Let me see what else I have. I don't know if I have other examples. Um, it could also mean like the womb, like or the veil. It could mean a couple things in those instances. So I guess what I'm saying is now that I've been like seeing it more, especially through the lens of because before I just always saw it as chaos. If someone says like, and our first Nephi's going across the many waters to the new world. You know that he's going across chaos and danger, but it's not. Go for it. You're going to say something.
yeah, yeah. As they go across the waters to the new land, it's a new life.
Yes.
So there's so you nailed it on the spot that there's a connection always with life from chaos.
Yeah. So Jack
So
Logan from Ancient Traditions talked a lot about how uh, about basically you can't create or destroy like energy, that it just like transforms, and basically the argument is that like the the what would you call the pre-creation universe was a bunch of matter just ready to be put into place. It didn't have like potential energy. It was a lot of it was stuff floating around, and that's kind of what we believe. We believe it was kind of like stuff, but that's very representative of the ocean or of the deep or the waters. It's just a bunch of stuff that like is not being used with a purpose. It's just there. It's materials. Um, then we'll go into it more. Yeah, one. So primordial chaos, veil, womb. Those are some of the things, and kind of like you said, Adams. Yeah, because like if you understand it as one symbol that means all these different things, kind of like I was talking about with language, you'll understand that that also has to do with creation a lot. Even if you don't expect it, there's creation involved. I guess one way of saying it is like if you're looking at a pile of Legos on the ground, you're not gonna see them. You'll be like, "Holy cow, this is chaos." You're not gonna see them as I'm putting in the negative for some reason. You're going to understand that Legos can always be used for creation, even if they are on the ground, just like in a mix. And that's the point, I guess, that I'm trying to get at.
it's the same analogy as to why we had to come down to this world of sin. It's a world of chaos, and life can come from it. You don't become holy by skipping over chaos. You have to actually delve into the chaos and then emerge victorious to create life.
Yeah, and I don't think we've talked about that tons, but that's one of the big symbols and throughout the Old Testament, and it's often referenced. I think when we mention it, we mention it as Jehovah defeating the dragon or defeating the agents of chaos and building his temple upon it. But that there's more. So the next word is was spirit, and the word it's translated from is ruach, ruach, or in Hebrew it's only 3 letters, but ruach, ruach. I can't even say it. I'm gonna try doing it like funky for some reason. It can mean a bunch of things in Hebrew. So because Hebrew is a very simplistic language, Adams, I think they had easier time understanding the different symbols. So for example, it can mean wind or breath or spirit, like divine presence, or disposition, like their mood. Um, and it can also mean, like, I guess, life force or spirit kind of are like how I think it's seen in the Bible, or in this instance, where it's the action of God. It's what causes it's his agency causing things to change. It's what he's using as his agent. Um, the reason I was thinking about this, though, and I brought it up to you already, is that there's a lot of parallels through this in the rest of the Bible, and even in the Book of Mormon and a bunch of other places, of instances where there's a representative of the wind or the spirit, or something that's hovering, fluttering, or brooding over the waters, over a creative scenario, over a nameless void. Um, One example is really easy, and that's Noah. And so Noah was called upon to um, build an ark because God was going to flood the whole world. And as he's on the ark and he's sitting on the waters, the primordial chaos in his ark, which is a symbol of the temple, he sends forth either a raven or a dove, depending on which verses you're going for, and that raven is to look for land. And so my question to you, Adams, because I have opinions, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on what the symbolism on all that is, because I have ideas, but that's just like, why is that story? And I guess I need to also preface this real quick with, we're not just looking at the story itself, and we're not saying the story doesn't mean anything, but the story's symbolism matters. If they use certain symbols in the story, then we need to understand those symbols. Otherwise, we're missing out on the point of the story. So,
I imagine there's symbolism that I don't know about or that hasn't been revealed to us yet. Regarding the spirit, I feel like that's a tricky one because I feel like it can be used in a couple different ways. Uh, but we talked about this before, David, about how the Spirit of God uh, is very necessary as part of the creation of life. So I don't know if you wanted to bring it up, but the story of Jesus' baptism, there's
yeah, that was going to be the next thing I was going to say. And I think it's all related. So actually dive into it right now. So give a summary of it and explain how it connects.
So in the story of Jesus' baptism, there's a very interesting part, which, at least for me, didn't make sense for a long time, where pretty much Jesus is baptized, a dove appears, and then the voice of the Lord, I don't remember which order, but the dove appears, and then the voice of the Lord is heard. And when the voice of the Lord is heard, there's the splitting of the veil. So there's then an access of communication to God, which is a real. Give me 1 second. Handing off a baby. There's a real connection because now the people below have access to the heavens in a way. The spirit or the dove in that instance is the new life that's being sent by God, kind of to be formed in Jesus's case. The old man was dying and a new man was being born, and that's the same for us in baptism.
To dive into this real quick,
go get into it. Yeah,
you're kind of insinuating and talking about the symbolism of how the breath and the spirit and life are all connected. So it's almost like God breathing out the dove that's going to Jesus, and he's breathing in it and becoming alive, almost like a very Adam scenario where God
Hmm.
breathed life into Adam.
Yeah, and so the face of as the Spirit of God is moved upon the face of the waters. Um, I don't know the Hebrew word for face. I that would be interesting. Do you happen to know that, David?
I have the whole
How they
thing, but I don't. I'd have to pick it apart. So the answer is no. Like I have the whole thing translated in Hebrew right here,
uh-huh.
uh, but I don't. Yeah,
That's
I don't know.
okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Uh, that's okay, but it's interesting that the Spirit of God or the breath of life moves upon the face of the water. This and the waters being chaos, and from then on there, uh, pretty much all goodness in life begins. Um, and it is sort of a symbolical representation or a spiritual representation of what's going on. Christ was reborn spiritually after John's baptism, uh, but later he did physically die and was reborn. Um, you can continue on that on what train you wanted to
No,
continue with, David.
that's fantastic because there's a few more connections. Like I mentioned Adam. Like I think that's the same story, where there's the need for life to be born out, and it's done by a breath or by a bird representing wind, which is a breath. And so in Noah's story, just to jump back there, I think that the same thing occurred. So there was the waters, the primordial chaos, the stuff with which we would use to create the new life, and um, it's a recreation of the creation scene in this scenario where Noah sends the bird out. It's the God's power, and it goes out and it finds the mound or the because there's a couple instances. Let me see if I can remember the different names of them. They find either the primeval mound or land or a couple different things that it could be. Because I also talk about like the nexus of the earth, um, but yeah, so it finds that, and what does all that symbolize? It symbolizes we talk about baptism or like the flood as like a birth, but why? Because if you don't have birth, if you don't have the breath of life, you don't have that unless you have like you just have getting washed, right?
Hmm. And the nice thing about how they phrased it, they said that it moved upon the face of the waters, because in Hebrew and in the Jewish tradition, God is the actor. He's not being acted upon, and it's his spirit that acts upon the waters. So where am I trying to go with this? The There's no um what's the word for like a really vague idea? There's no vague idea. There's a physical action being depicted by the writers here, so that God is in control and God is the one that's doing the acting.
Yeah, you're not being left to misunderstanding of what is occurring. There's action occurring, and it is God who is doing the acting. Yeah, yeah, I love it. I was trying to check to see if I had some other examples of it. So, and sorry, my heater's coming on, so it's going to be a little loud. But there's actually a lot of psalms that talk about this, which I thought was interesting. So let me see if I have any of those pulled up. So like Psalm 18 is really interesting. Let me see if I can go to that. So yeah, so it's a song. this is one of the things when we talk about the Psalms, I think it's like super clear that there's like temple stuff going on just because of this. So, for example, I'm gonna read a bunch of verses and then I'll highlight the ones that we're talking about. So, actually, I could probably show the screen. If I remember how to do that. You know what? I don't care enough. Window capture. Do you remember how to do it? I've done it before, right? Okay. Anyway, um, Psalm 18. I will love thee, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my strength, in whom I will trust, my buckler and the horn of my salvation, and my high tower. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, so I will be saved from mine enemies. The sorrows of death compassed me, and the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. The sorrows of hell compassed me about, the snares of death prevented me. In my distress I called upon the Lord, and cried unto my God. He heard my voice out of his temple, and my cry came before him, even into his ears. Then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations also of the hills moved and were shaken, because he was wroth. There went up a smoke out of his nostrils, and fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also, and came down, and darkness was under his feet. And he rode upon a cherub, and did fly, yea, he did fly upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness his secret place. His pavilion round about him were dark waters and thick clouds of the skies. And it keeps going, but it's interesting that like when God comes down, he's riding upon a cherub. He's flying, and what is he flying? He's flying above the dark waters. So, and the rest of the stuff, and then it keeps going. He says, and he sent me from above. He took me. He drew me out of many waters. Is like what one of the things that eventually happens. I don't know. I think that's super interesting. Like it's temple, 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 and then he cries for help from God. And how does God do it? God does it by flying upon above the waters. Is how it's done. And then he brings forth David and actually lifts him up out of the waters, creating him anew. So let me see what else I have. Oh, then there's another obvious one that we didn't talk about. Mark 4. Jesus subdues the winds and the rain. He subdues the sea. So I don't know if you see any parallels there. I'm going to pull it up real quick, but my scripture app is sometimes a little slow. Do you have any thoughts on that? Are you?
Yeah, so that was kind of what I was hinting at in regards to God as the actor.
Yeah.
He's the one who acts upon. And in the story of Christ calming the seas is that he is the actor of nature. His and one thing we didn't talk about is that Christ, uh, his word is the same as effectively as a king's order or the God's breath of life. It holds power and nature and the creation of life in it.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of questions actually about that, because there seems to be, I don't know if it's the same or different, but there's a power in naming, there's a power with words, and God's power comes from the Holy of Holies when he speaks. And so clearly the speaking, and naming and creation, God said, let there be light. So there's a creative power as well. But then there's also the wind before it as well. So I'm going to read this. This is Mark 4. And there arose a great storm. And what kind of storm is it, Adams? It's a storm of wind. And the waves beat into the ship so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And they awake him and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was great calm. And the interesting thing in my mind about that is that he uses the words to calm, but there's already the wind about on the sea. There's the wind acting on chaos. There's like a creative a power acting on this primordial void, on this primordial mass to be created. And Christ is like, calm down, and it did it. So,
And then the first thing that he does after he calms the sea is that uh, he goes there and removes unclean spirits from a man, showing that Christ not only had the power to control the elements, because God has acts upon and is the creator of life, but he effectively recreated a man, a man died and then was birthed again. You know, his unclean spirits were destroyed, and his new spirit was created. And I think that's one of the great essences of the true and everlasting gospel, is that God has the power to destroy the old natural man and create a new one. And that new one has the ability to enter the presence of God.
I love that, and I think that's a great summary. So instead of continuing and talking about too many things, I think we could just end it there. But I guess to summarize it, I think that there are a lot of instances in the scriptures of things that are right in front of us, and this is another example of it. Like, it's repeated everywhere. This is a motif that's constantly repeated, and yet I didn't think about it until it was put into like a really obvious, like it had to be really obvious for me. And then I was like, what about these other instances? And they make you think. Like, I'm sure that Jesus or that one of the disciples, I'm sure they knew exactly what these were references to. And so when they told these stories, they were telling stories that were more than just feel good stories. They were stories with like 40 different layers. So for example, you know, there's the layer of like, there's chaos and Christ calms it with his voice. And then, like you said, there's the most important layer where he creates the new man, us. He creates us as a new man who can come and return to God. But like, it's all very it would have felt very similar. Like the Jewish people he was talking to would have been like, this is the creation of the earth at the same time. Like, it's all these things. And in this instance, we are the earth. We are Adamah. We are Adam. We are man. We are the thing being created and found. We are, as Christ calms the water, he finds the land, and we are that land. So,
Yeah, so as we're being created by God anew, in order for us to replicate and be like God, we have to create anew as well. We have to create life. And it's very important we don't forget that our ability to become like God also, you know, our ability to become like God, who created us out of the waters of chaos, who created us out of the chaotic selves we are into something better and more holy, we have to do for our children effectively. We have to create them out of the waters of chaos that is human life, and then the complexities of
we have to be Christ's at some
children.
point.
And
Where it was it
yeah,
Peter who tried walking on the water as well and fell in, and we have to pull him out of the water, pull him out of the chaos, a new man. We have to pull our children and create
yeah.
them. Yeah. I love that.
You can't separate it. If you try to separate it and have just a focus on self, you're forgetting
Mm-hmm.
what God was trying to do. He was trying to create life for us.
Yeah, yeah, and he's trying to bring us to him, so that we are all together, so that we are the count. I'm going to jump into too many things, so I'm not going to do that. But so that it doesn't make any sense for God to be a God who only desires glory and people to worship him. He's trying to bring us all together so that we are all joined at last with him, with our progeny and his progeny, and everyone together.
And one of the great challenges that people don't understand is that has to start from chaos. So one of the reasons why we're in a chaotic world is because righteousness can only come from chaos. It can't come, you can't eliminate choice, you can't eliminate consequence and hope that something good comes from it. There has to be something there. There has to be the ability to choose in order for you to be righteous. You can't be righteous without choice. So as much as people want an easy life or easy this or that, it won't. It's not godliness to eliminate the chaos in which exists for us to leave.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, well, I say we end there. Just want to say thanks for all your thoughts. I really think you bring a balance to my ramblings, so I appreciate it very much. So, cool. We'll talk again some other time, but thank you, and everyone, I hope you enjoyed.